be authentic. At the end of the day, if you learn to become curious, you will gain a skill that will provide for you for the rest of your life.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Hey Mark, the podcast where I, Mark, get to have open and authentic conversations about things like mental health, self-development, and just the problems we face on a daily basis. The reason I started this podcast is because I want to try and help alleviate some of the suffering that's happening out there in silence for people that don't know kind of how to put the words to what they're feeling, who to talk to about it, or what to do. So at the very least, I'm hoping I can bring you guys some good perspectives, new way to think about things, or a little bit of entertainment. And today, I'm joined by Mitch Stro right here. We're chilling out. We're just having a little chat. We've been chatting for about like 15, 20 minutes. But Mitch, why don't you tell people that can listen to the rest of our conversation, kind of like who you are, what you're about, and I guess where they could find you.
Sure. Mark.
That's right.
Mark. Yeah. I am someone who's big into the health and wellness. I work as a personal trainer. I've been doing that for quite a few years now. Like many people, big into the self-development, big into wellness. Just a general health and wellness kind of guy.
100%, dude. I kind of feel the same. I was actually just explaining that to someone about how I got into like health and wellness through the avenue of mental health, and then I realized like all of this is all encompassing.
Yeah.
So like if I had to learn about my emotions and my hormones, etc., well then that led me to start to look into nutrition, and then that led me to start to look into like gut brain connections and how I can kind of start to improve my gut health. And then all of these different avenues, obviously my background was like bodybuilding before as well, so I already had the fitness. So once you start adding nutrition, fitness, mental health, maybe a little bit of philosophy or psychology, like you're pretty much just looking at wellness at that point.
Yeah, and it's very interesting too where we decide to like draw the lines between things. It's like, where do you draw the line between mental and physical health? This is a conversation I have with a lot of people where it's like, okay, like if what you eat and what you do affects your brain's neurochemistry, and your brain's neurochemistry affects what you think,
yeah,
and what you think affects your neurochemistry, it's like, where do you want to start? Top down or bottom up?
Yeah. Where'd you start?
For me, like most people, bottom up. So got into wellness with just working out.
Yeah.
High school, just the typical like scrawny guy, and picked on, so I needed to beef up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so spent a few years just like beating up my body, not knowing what the fuck I was doing. But eventually started to move towards the more mental aspect, the more spiritual, psychological aspect, mainly through my experience with my father. So it was a couple of years ago, he was diagnosed with ALS. Okay. And so for people who don't know what ALS is, it's Lou Gehrig's disease. So pretty much the myelin sheath on your nerves starts to degenerate, and you begin to lose control of your motor function. So when I was experiencing that, I was getting the big psychological aspect of seeing someone who's facing a end of life crisis, who's having to reflect on like, look at how I've spent the rest of my life, past life, and how do I come to terms with how I've lived. So that got me deep into different religions, different philosophies, and really exploring what we might be, what consciousness is, and really take a more holistic approach to health.
That's crazy, man. That's a fucking rough journey for sure. Anything like that, man, is so fucking scary. ALS or like dementia is so fucking scary. I have a customer right now that I work with who her husband's got pretty bad dementia, and it's like fucking rough, man. It's scary. Anything like that. Like, so when you're like kind of watching someone kind of go through that journey, like, do you think that, because there's no way to change what we've done already, So do you think that it's more in terms of like coming to terms with what you've done and just kind of comforting yourself with that? Because there's no way to go back and fix everything that you wish you could.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing that you need to recognize. It's like, okay, like each day is never promised. And, you know, you have to live with the choices you've made. And for some people, it's a lot easier to sort of frame their past in a positive way where it's like, hey, like, you know, I've gone through all these rough experiences, but hey, it's brought me to this point where so much growth and development has happened. But if you're not at that point and you're just stuck in the weeds of it and you can't see, you know, the forest through the trees, then, you know, it's not such an easy job.
Yeah. So what do you like, what kind of tools did you kind of, I guess, learn from, or like what takeaways did you have, like, just kind of being able to come to terms? Because I still fucking struggle with that, man. Like, where I look back, well, even if I say I look at like my current self and then I look back at my prior actions and I'm like, fuck, man, I shouldn't have been doing X, Y, and Z. And if I had done A, B, and C more, I would be like so much more further along in my progress. Like, I'm a young guy, like I'm 26 right now, and I have regrets. Like, you know what I mean? So like, what kind of takeaways did you have to like kind of, I guess, watching someone else go through that, and you've probably been pretty reflective on your own life.
Yeah.
Like what kind of tools do you use in terms of like taking a look back at like your life and I guess dealing with the regrets or looking at the things that you wish you could have done better, I guess?
Yeah, I guess, you know, it's going to go a little deep, but the big place where I found freedom is when you're investigating the sense of who you are. So it's like, if you feel like you've been there's something that's been the same over time, or like this continuous sense of self, then you tend to have that like, oh, I should have done this. Oh, what did I do? But then like, if you reflect back, it's like, okay, what is the same right now as me 10 years ago? It's like every cell in your body's turned over. You know, what is it that has maintained throughout there? And when you really strip that down, you know, you kind of figure out there's everything and nothing there.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask, is like when you're looking at consistencies from like your past self or your current self, like, are you looking at like characteristics? Are you looking at like kind of behaviors? Are you looking at like hobbies? Are you looking at like what is your focus? Like, because when I look back at myself, my past self, and I look at my current self, I think of what's consistent. The first thing I think of are characteristics. Like, I like making people laugh. I like making people feel good or feel confident. Like, because I think a part of me is like, I wish I could do that for myself, like back in the day. Now I feel a lot more confident, and now I can make myself laugh and entertain myself. I just struggled with being alone before. But I think of characteristics. I think of like kind of behavioral traits, because I don't think of things I do. I think of the things that I enjoy, like I said, like making people laugh, making people feel comfortable, or feeling like I've always kind of like emotionally gotten off to getting other people to be happy. Like, that's kind of the way. So when I think of consistencies in my past self and current self, like that's what comes to my mind. Is that what you look for, like kind of characteristics like that, or personality traits, or do you look at like more like the more physical side of it, like what you're physically doing, like actions, hobbies, like maybe working out at the gym, or do you look at like careers? Like, what is it in terms of consistency that you're looking at?
Like, what stays the same over time?
Yeah.
Like, I like the idea that it's whatever you choose to stick, or, you know, your karma.
So all of it then.
Yeah, yes and no. It's, you know, there's certain things that are imprinted in us more deeply than others, like very traumatic or very emotional experiences, which then tend to have a more permanent effect on our personality. And, you know, like, comes out like anybody who's had some form of traumatic experience can probably, you know, feel into certain things about them that are a byproduct of that. So like maybe it's an abusive parent, maybe it's you got lied to and cheated on in a relationship. But I think none of those are necessarily so grounded in you that they're unchangeable, and that's a perspective that a lot of people have a hard time breaking. Because I think at the end of the day, it's like the only thing that stays consistent throughout any period of time is this awareness that there's something happening. The lights are on. There's consciousness here.
Mm-hmm. So what does like consciousness mean? Like what, like when someone's like, because I kind of have my own idea of what consciousness is, but I'm still figuring it out. Like I couldn't give you I don't think I could give you a definition, but like maybe you could. Do you have like what does that mean to you when you're saying consciousness?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because you need, like, for me personally, I need to differentiate between consciousness and awareness.
Yeah.
Because, you think about sleeping, like, you have this period of time where you're not conscious, but then you're able to remember your dreams. Mm-hmm. So
you are. I am.
That's a skill. It's a skill you can practice.
I know. I'm working on it. Actually, we can get into that.
The dream journals are a good one.
Yeah,
we'll definitely get into that. But there was some awareness of what was happening in that period of time, despite you not being conscious. Mm-hmm. So with consciousness, it needs to. I don't know, man. It's a deep question. I honestly don't have a clear answer.
Yeah. When you think about consciousness, do you think like individual level, or do you think like societal level, or like group level?
Like a sort of like a collective unconscious, like
or a collective
Jungian
consciousness
idea.
Yeah. So I'm not really that familiar with it, but that's the way I think about consciousness. Like I had this conversation with my buddy the other day, and we see eye to eye, but we think about things differently. Like we were talking about God and like kind of like spirituality. And he helped me out. I said thank you to him. That's how the conversation started. He said, it's just your higher power working through me.
Yeah.
I said, you're a God, man. And he said, no, I'm not. I need God. And I said, well, I think we're all God. Like, that's the way I view it. So I think, indeed, you are God. The way I look at it is like when you look at a tree outside, you see the tree and you think, that's a tree, right? You don't think, oh, there's a bunch of leaves that are on a bunch of branches that are on a fucking tree that's in the ground that has roots as well. You don't think like individual parts. So the way I see it, and this is kind of like, yeah, we're going deep real quick, but it's like the way I see it is like kind of God or the universe or whatever fucking word you want to use for it is the tree. And then we're kind of extensions of, like there's like the branches, which is like societies, different groups of societies, and then the leaves, which are on the branch, but we don't look at the tree and say that, we just say that's the tree. So I think that in my eyes, that's what God is. And so I think like we're all part of the tree, we're all the same thing. So that would be like what I consider to be consciousness, like group consciousness. And then like you have your own individual level consciousness, which is kind of a microcosm of that. But like in the entire thing, there's not like a separation of like, oh, that's God and that's me. Mm-hmm. Like we're all the thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so like consciousness is like, there is a difference sort of between group consciousness and self-consciousness, but the difference is just kind of your scope of vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like a very Eastern versus Western approach to spirituality, where it's like in the West, it's very monotheistic, where there's the one God and everybody below. Whereas when you go to the East, typically it's a polytheistic where there's different aspects of God out there. So you look at like a Hindu religion where it's like Shiva, who's the aspect of destruction, and so on and so forth. And that's interesting. Like how that fits in with the Jungian approach is very much like, okay,
you're talking about Carl Jung, right?
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
It's very much like there is the ocean, which is consciousness, and then you're a wave within that consciousness.
I love that.
You know, you're a part of the whole, but you're also this individual aspect, you know, moving through space and time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically the same analogy.
Yeah.
You're a leaf on a tree.
Exactly.
You're not the leaf, you're like the tree. You're the whole part of the tree. So it's like kind of the same thing. if I could guess, this is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like I shared a video the other day with the group, and it's like they even use that analogy, whereas like you're not the wave in the ocean. The wave is the ocean. Mm-hmm. It's a part of the ocean.
Yeah.
So like we're not separate from our environment. We're a part of our environment. We're together. Like we're in the same thing. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And I'm trying to think of the researcher. He studies LSD before it was illegal.
Before it was illegal?
Yeah.
Okay. So like in like the 50s then?
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name. He's from he worked with Albert Hoffman for a little while. I'm blanking on his name.
I can't help you with that.
It'll come to me.
Okay.
But pretty much he conducted the very first research with LSD before it was made illegal. And he would work with clients and he would record all of their experiences. And pretty much over, I believe it's like a decade, he recorded a whole host of these. And he would find that one, there was a pattern between what their birth chart is and the
like
alignment
astrological
exactly.
Okay.
And it would dictate part of their trip, but also that people were having experiences that were unexplainable. So he goes into one example where I guess it's this guy he was working with was having visions of a very specific, like it was a demon looking thing with a pig head.
Gross.
And it was guarding a gate. So he recorded it, and then after that session with that client, he called up what's his name? Famous author. He did what is his name now?
What's the book? Might know it.
The Hero's Journey. I can't believe I'm blanking on this right now. Very popular. Campbell. Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, okay.
So he called up Joseph Campbell, who's an expert in the world's mythological beliefs. And he told him about this experience that his client had. And he's like, you're not going to believe me, but this vision that this guy was having is the exact god that this one out in the jungle in New Guinea tribe has. Like,
wow.
Spot on all the details.
He's never heard of it or anything.
And this guy has never heard of this before. What and it's like just certain experiences like that which make you think it's like, okay, how deeply...
Do you think he has like lineage back there and it's like an ancestral memory?
Who knows, man? But it's like, I don't know, you might have experienced it too, where it's like, I don't want to get too out there.
Let's get
like,
out there. Let's fucking get out there.
When you start like meditating on a regular basis and you develop a degree of concentration, more and more often, these situations will happen where it's just like, of course that would happen. Where it's like, it's just so played out, where it's like something you might have predicted that it's like, of course it happened.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a couple people out there that are probably laughing right now because I always say that shit. I'm like, dude, I could have seen this coming. Like,
yeah.
It's almost like it's like a written thing.
Yeah, and you kind of get connected into something deeper where it's like you were...
I always thought that was just my ego. That's sick, man. Do you believe in like ancestral memories?
I do. A really good book is It Didn't Start With You, if you've never read it, but it's really good, and the guy does a very good job. I'm terrible with names.
It's all good, me too.
But he goes and takes a very psychological approach, which is very beautiful because people are actually much more open to it because it's not so metaphysical.
Wishy-washy kind of
exactly
shit.
But he works within, he explains it through like epigenetics, and you know, more and more research is coming out too, where it's like you look at people who have past family members who've gone through the Holocaust. 3 generations later, they're seeing epigenetic marks of that regulate anxiety levels. So they have higher levels of anxiety just based upon, you know, what happened 3 generations ago.
How do they trace that? Like, do they take like a pool of people that like say they know like a certain group of people's ancestors were prisoners at like all these different camps, and then they study that group, and then they have a like random control group from the rest of society. Like,
they're measuring anxiety levels through certain genetic markers.
do you know what they are? I couldn't tell you.
I know the very surface level.
Okay.
There's clear markers that regulate like arousal levels that would dictate like how anxious someone would be.
And so like because their families, I guess, genealogy suffered a certain amount, like physically, mentally, spiritually, etc. Like that was almost like passed down, like that level of maybe like are they looking at like hormones? Like they're looking at, like we were talking about earlier, like are they looking at like cortisol levels? Or are they looking at like more anecdotal, like how do you often feel?
Like for measuring the anxiety?
Yeah.
Oh, they're looking at genetic markers. Okay. So certain genetic markers that are like regulating someone's baseline like alertness.
That's crazy, man.
But it makes sense too, because it's like back to Carl Jung. He had the great quote where it's like, we are all tasked with the unfinished business of our parents. And you know, you can, at least personally, I can speak anecdotally that, you know, once you grow up at a certain level, more and more often you realize like, shit, this is what my parents used to do. Like you get into a relationship and you lose your shit, and the first thing's like, fuck, this is exactly how my parents used to fight.
Yeah. And
like all these things start coming up, and you start to recognize more and more how much of a product of your environment you really are.
Yeah. Do you think that you take after more like your father or your mother? Personally.
Both of them.
Yeah. Both. Yeah, that's a tough question too, because I think I'd say both as well.
Yeah, it's just certain tendencies, but you know, I think with everything, it's as you begin to recognize more and more, then you begin to have the ability to change them.
I like that. Yeah, because a lot of things are changeable that we say aren't. Like I always have conversations with people, and they're like, "Oh, but that's just kind of like how my family is. Like my dad was like that, my grandpa was like that, my brother's like that. Like that's just how my family is." And then like I always think, I'm like, dude, that doesn't have to be that way. Like, what are you talking? You're saying that like it's a permanent circumstance, but it's a behavioral thing.
I remember Stanislav Grof. That was the researchers. Okay, where were we? Sorry, buddy. It just came to my.
But no, it's all good, man. But like I think like so many people attach like maybe behaviors or habits that they have to like their family, right? So like maybe, I mean, alcoholism is probably one of the biggest ones that you hear about. They're like, oh, my dad was an alcoholic, so I struggle with blah, 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 which I could probably understand from what you were saying earlier. But there's little things like maybe habits or behaviors. Like, oh, how come you do that thing that way when you know it's more efficient this way? And you're like, oh, I know, but like that's just how my dad did it, and that's how his dad did it, and that's how my brother did it. So like that's just how it is. And then I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, but it doesn't have to be. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like it's behavioral. You're choosing it, right? Like, do you think that?
I mean, that's a really hard question, where it's like, where do you draw the line between like free will and then just like the cycle of habits being who you are? Because it's like, you look at someone like Aristotle. His whole thing is like, what you are in the most fundamental level is your habits. It's like what you do each day is what defines you. And you know, if you've been repeating a habit for so long, you know, typically we become more and more identified with that being part of us. And so if it's something that, you know, a habit you picked up from your parents, you're gonna be much more identified with that if you've been acting that way since a child. But with that too, like when it comes to things like alcoholism, again, there's like a genetic component in there, but then, you know, genetics never determine your future. And we're seeing this more and more that, you know, it's instead epigenetics, and you can think of it like a keyboard. Those are your genetics, and then the epigenetics sit on top of that, and epi genes get activated by your environment, and they work like pressing down on a key to turn on a gene. So you might have a gene for alcoholism, but if you're able to, moderate your intake, be more aware that, hey, maybe I do have this greater tendency, then you can avoid that button being pressed. And, I think that could be considered sort of healing transgenerational trauma in a sense.
Yeah. You've kind of like alluded to it a couple times, and it's like a common theme on this show as well, like especially in the interviews for sure. Like a lot of people talk about this, and like you've kind of said it in a couple different ways. Like in the very beginning you said to like kind of know yourself, like know who you are. And then you've been talking about identity as well, and you did sort of allude to it as well with Aristotle by saying like your identity is like what you do on a daily basis, but like how do you view identity? Because I think a lot of the world's problems right now that we see, especially in like North America, especially in Canada, and like the way that I see it in my circles is like I feel like people are having like almost an identity crisis. Like we don't know who we are. We don't know what identity even is. And I even struggle sometimes with the concept of explaining this. But like I always tell people like, and maybe you have a different view, maybe you have the same view, but like I always tell people like you're not your body. You're not your, what you do for a living. You're not your occupation.
Yeah.
You're not who you are. Like you're not what you look like when you see in the mirror. Those aren't what make up your identity in my beliefs. Like, so like how do you kind of define identity, or like personally, like, or like kind of if someone's like because when you tell people you're like you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
If someone's out there listening and they're like, I'm Mark. What the fuck are you talking about? I know who I am. I'm Mark. Like I'm a carpenter or I'm a podcaster. Like how do you define identity? What are you saying specifically?
I think it's very context dependent. Like, if you're playing the game of Western civilization or Western society, I should say, you need to do the formalities where it's like, well, I do this for a job. I like these things, and maybe like, oh, it's my sports. Like, you need to have these.
I'm a white guy.
You need to have these objective measures of how to box yourself into somewhere. But like, when I can like just sit down and get like groovy with my buddies, it's kind of like, well, like, what do I really identify with? Well, you can do the practice of like going through and examining for yourself what is you and what isn't you. And so the practice, the formal name of the practice is called neti, which is not this, something like that. And you can sit down and do this on your own. It's a fun one, but just observe every single thing that passes through any of your sensory gates. So notice what you're thinking. Is that you? Notice what you're feeling. Just start choosing things around you and just observing. Like, is this me? Like, how can this be me if it's constantly changing? And this is where you get into like the experiences of like dissolving this false sense of self, because we typically like confine our identity to within our body, but all it takes is just close your eyes and feel the distinction between your skin and your environment around you. As soon as you pay attention to that, it dissolves into nothing. And so it's, you need to have a sense of self to be functional in society, but you also need to recognize that you're something more than that.
Yeah, because I always try, when I explain identity, I think like a value system. Like you're kind of more your values than you are your body, right? Like if you were to lose your hand, like you'd still be Mitch.
Yeah.
Even though part of your body's gone, like that doesn't make you less you. You're still you. But if you lost like some of your values, I'd be like, I don't know this guy anymore. Do you know what I mean?
What are you using for like an example of your values?
Like you value health and wellness, right? So if I saw a snapshot of you, say like in 6 months from now, and you're sitting on your couch and you're smoking cigarettes inside and you're fucking eating Cheetos, and I'm like, when's the last time you moved? You're like, well, I walked to my toaster and I'm fucking eating a bagel with like fucking Cheese Whiz on it. I'd be like, I don't even know this guy anymore. Like, it seems like a completely different person. But if you lost your leg and you're in a wheelchair, I'd be like, oh, Mitch is in a wheelchair. Like, I wouldn't think of you as a different person. Whereas, like, if I saw your values shift completely, I'd be like, who is this guy? I thought I knew a different guy. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I attach more, like, values to, not, like, even behaviors. Because, like, if I smoke and then I quit smoking, I'm not less Mark. I'm not smoker Mark or non-smoker Mark. I'm just Mark, right? So, like, behaviors, I feel like, don't even define you. Or what you do, I feel like it's almost more like the value system. Because, like, if you know my values, you can pretty much guess my opinions or how I'll react or what I'll be doing. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, if you just know what someone does, you don't know their opinions, you don't know their beliefs, you don't know their values, you just know what they do. So, like, values are more telling about a person, in my opinion, than what they do or what they look like or anything like that. Because if you know someone's values and you know they're consistent with those values, then I feel like you have a good idea of that person.
I like the sentiment of that, but I think it's, like, for me personally, I found it quite, I take a very irrational approach to these things, just because, like, same with, like, the experience with my dad. I saw someone who identified and whose values were, like, caring for his family, being a provider, being a hard worker, all of these things. But then when you're turned into, like, put into a position where you lose all of those things that you have identified yourself with, your whole world comes crashing down. Because who are you now that all of these values are based upon actions? Like, your entire sense of self is shattered. And so it's like, not to get too hippie about it, but
I like it, man.
At the bottom of it, it's like love. It's like, I think that's the most fundamental thing that you can. Are you a loving person? How well did you love in your life? Did you care for other people? Did you listen? Like, I don't know. It doesn't. I'm very. I don't know, man. It's a hard one.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because now that I think about it, yeah. Because when you have, like, even if you have, like, a stroke or if you have anything that could happen, even concussions, like, some people's values completely shift after they have, like, even just like a concussion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I wouldn't make them less them, which then even broadens the idea of identity even more.
Well, it's why I really love Ram Dass for that, because it's like, you know Ram Dass?
No.
Okay, so Richard Alpert, he was there at Harvard when Tim Leary was experimenting with mushrooms, and then the whole research, and then that got shut down, and pretty much he went to India. This is just the cliff notes. Went to India, met his guru, became Ram Dass, so on and so forth. But he came back to the West and was a very, very profound speaker. He did lectures or Dharma talks about different spiritual topics. And
sort of like Alan Watts?
Very similar to Alan Watts. Good friends with Alan Watts. And for a long time, like, that's who he was. He was this guy who came back who could give these amazing talks. Like, if you listen to any of them, they're very profound and very, very enlightening. But eventually he had a stroke and he lost his ability to talk, which was something that he'd been holding on to for so long. And he said, this is his words and perspective as well, not just me, but he lost that thing that made him unique, the thing that he was known for.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's difficult to talk, it's difficult to take care of himself. And it was the greatest challenge for him that brought him to a greater identity of just being loving awareness. And that's his whole thing, where it's like, you know, you are not any of these things, you are what's beneath it. You're the loving awareness that holds it all.
Okay, and spoiler alert. So he goes from being like this amazing communicator to you know, not being able to speak or not being able to convey messages or kind of give these ideas or philosophies to people. So, like, what happened after that? Was he, like, writing books, or was that just kind of people?
He's I'm not sure. Maybe, like, I think he might have written a book afterwards, but he was quite old at the time. I think he was probably in his 70s or 80s, maybe later.
Probably just recluded to a, like, private life.
Yeah, so he still held retreats and stuff, but like his health was just so deteriorated at a time where, you know, everybody who was around him at that time was just saying like he was just like had such a deep loving presence around him where it's like, you know, it encouraged and brought that about in other people, and so he was just this presence there after that,
kind of just like radiating energy.
Yeah.
And then people were like, all right, I see where this guy's at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I feel like that's that literally reminds me of actually kind of my grandpa, because when I was a little kid, I was like 10, and my family's like kind of old in sense that like there's a big age gap between each generation. Like my grandpa was born in 1913, my dad was born in 58, and then I was born in 95, so it's like a good 40 years between each generation. So by the time I'm 10, my grandpa's like in his late 80s, right? Early 90s. I think, yeah, 90. I think he was like 92 when I was 10. So, anyways, to make a long story short, he was from Denmark, and then on his way to North America during the Second World War, he went through like Germany, Austria, picked up the language there. So when he came here, his wife was German. He spoke Danish, German, English. Was like his third language.
Yeah.
And then raised my dad and his sister, right? He ended up being like a single father. My grandmother passed away, and anyways, in his late adult years, like once I'm born, my dad's like a father already. My grandpa had like a couple strokes, and like the first one was probably the most wicked one, and he like forgot how to speak English, and I think he still was pretty fluent in German and Danish, because those were like his first two languages.
Yeah.
But he lost English, and he couldn't read or write anything. No languages that way. So like it was kind of like I went from going to this guy's house all the time as a kid to I can't even communicate with him anymore. There's no way to speak to him. I can't understand Danish or German, and he doesn't understand English. Like my dad had to reteach him English and how to write his name and everything like that, right? And it's like in your 90s, like you're supposed to be like, that's like kind of your, well, I guess you are on your decline, but it's like you can't communicate with any of your family that's around you. There's no other like family of his that's in Canada even. Like I don't know any of them. So it's like he can't communicate with any of his family. He can't communicate with anybody. He can't even read or write. Like but like still I would go and visit him, and it's funny looking back now. If I were to look back at a 10-year-old going to do that, I'd be like, you know, I understand, but like, how are you communicating, kind of thing. But at 10, it still felt normal. So like, I can kind of see what you're talking about when you're saying like, there doesn't have to be like that conveying of ideas all the time. Like sometimes people just radiate a certain energy. Because he was still able to make me food. He was still, which was a cool thing at 10 years old. You're like, oh, I'm going to Grandpa's. He's making me desserts and stuff. He was a baker. He was a good baker.
Nice.
And so he'd make pastries. He'd make like different rice puddings and different things that Danish people make. But that was like that became his language almost for me. Like that's my fondest memory, is going to his place for desserts. So it's like, that's kind of, I guess... Yeah, I can understand what you're saying about like kind of radiating energy instead of communicating, and you can kind of still understand someone that way.
Yeah, and you know, you look at, there's lots of research where it's like the majority of communication is nonverbal.
It's like 90% or something like that.
Something like that.
I don't know the actual statistics.
Yes, that is statistically right.
It's 90%. Factual. It's factual. 90%. But yeah, I completely agree, man. That's nuts. Do you think that like because obviously like this is something close to you, like do you think that when people, whether they're family or not, do you think that this is going to get, I guess, philosophical or...
Love it.
But
go for it.
Do you think that people stay with us that way? Like do you think that their energy ever leaves? Do you think that, I guess this maybe goes into more spiritual, but do you think that when people pass, do you think that their energy's gone? Do you think that that's it? Or like what do you think? Do you think that they kind of stay with us?
This is a bit of a cop-out. I don't draw hard boundaries upon these things.
Okay.
Like if anybody's ever like picked up a book about anything like quantum physics or anything, as soon as you start looking into like reality, you just realize how much none of it makes sense. And like even like our visual perception, like we see a tiny little fraction upon the spectrum of light. We see less things than what we actually see. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. We perceive less than what is actually out there.
Yeah, we have limited senses. We have sight,
Exactly.
smell, touch, whatever, right? So like we can't, like sharks can fucking sense electric waves or whatever. Like there's so many other senses that we don't have, that we're like, we have a limited perspective or field of vision almost.
Exactly. And I guarantee you, there's other things out there that we cannot sense because we do not have the instruments to do it.
Yeah.
So maybe one day we'll invent an instrument that's going to allow us to perceive the greater world that's out there. But where I was going with this is, I don't know, man. Like, I like the idea of there being like their energy that lasts or some sort of like spirit or something. But at the same time, I find it very, very hard to understand like rationally. Because like from my own experience, like I over time have fallen more and more into a Buddhist perspective of things, and it's like when you deconstruct your experience, it's like what is there at the very bottom, and when you look there, it's like I'm not going to give away the surprise. You need to do that work yourself, but it's hard to pinpoint one thing of what would last. And it goes back to the whole thing about identity. Like, are we talking about someone's traits? Like, is it, their karma from, what's happened in the past and then...
Or past generations.
Exactly. Where it's like, yeah, it's hard to, outside of the body, it's hard to pinpoint what someone is.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess if you're going to think... oh, this part of, my grandfather, this part of your father that's, like, still here. Like, what is it that's still here? It's definitely not their physical body.
Yeah.
But is it their ideas? Is it their thought processes? Like, I even think sometimes, like, because I do the same work that my father does, right? He runs the company that I work for. So, a lot of the times when I'm at work and say I'm faced with, like, a new task, I kind of think of, like, if these were my dad's hands, like what would he do? Like how would he kind of go about this problem? Like they don't even need to be gone from this earth to kind of like give you that information almost, or be with you when they're not physically. So I guess like, if you were to look at like what stays, like I think of like how would they treat this person, or how would they react, or how would they behave, or what would they do? But again, I guess, well, that is different than values.
But to riff on that just a little bit, I kind of like the idea of like what you're going as like, okay, like if we look at it that your experience is within your head. So it's clear that, there's a delay between things happening outside and then you experiencing it and your brain generating this virtual reality that we live in. With that being noted, it's like, okay, if this whole experience that I'm perceiving is happening within my head, how does it not make, how does it not make it real if I were to, really believe that my dad was here and I was thinking about his traits, or I was thinking about his memories? Like, I still have neurons firing in my head that were firing the same time when I saw him when he was alive. He might not be here physically, but my body's experiencing his presence still. So it's
like time isn't linear kind of thing. Like you can still be that past self that's with him.
Exactly. Almost. Yeah. Or like, if we're not something that's pinpointed in an exact point of time, what's stopping you from being there right now? That might just be too far out. I'm just...
Yeah. But then, because then I'm not even talking to you right now, man. I'm already listening to us talking, dude. Like, that's so... Yeah, that's...
But that's true, though. It's like, things happen quicker. Like, what's really interesting is we experience things happening all at once. Like when I'm looking at you and you're talking, I'm perceiving the visual input coming in at the same time as the audio input, but they're different lengths away from my brain, which means that they get to my brain at different times.
Yeah, speed and light travel at different speeds.
Exactly.
Or I mean, sound and light.
Yeah, just like from your sense organs to your brain. And so your brain does this magical thing where it takes all of these inputs and puts it together perfectly so that I don't perceive that, fraction of a second delay between, the audio and the visual components.
Yeah, because you're like...
And this is me sober, by the way. I'm not even
right now. I was literally about to say it. Anybody listening to this, like, this is your cue to fucking light a joint, because this is where this conversation is going. But I like this, man, because I'd be interested to talk to someone that, like, fully understands, and maybe you do, but, like, a neuroscientist that could, I guess, explain, like, there's... You say something, right? And I see you say it, and I hear you say it. And the sound travels from your fucking vocal cords into my ear, and that takes time.
Yeah.
And then it has to, like, then understand the words you're saying, and then basically translate that into, like, okay, what do these words mean? And it's kind of translating everything you say to a point where it's like, this is a picture that my mind can show me, and that's what it is, right? But then it's like, that's happening with sound, that's happening with, like, maybe the temperature in the room, that's happening with what I can see, like I can see your mouth moving. And so, like, there's all these different delays. Like, it's like the sound has to travel here, and then it has to be translated at the same time as, like, the image has to be traveled here, and then that has to be translated in a way that my brain can perceive an image.
Yeah.
So it's like there's so much going on, and there's all these different delays, these different gaps of time. Yet everything, when I snap my fingers, it's like, that was that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like... It's interesting, yeah, you say that, and time seems to be, like, going on this whole time consistently, but, like, how could that be happening? Like, if I take an event, and I'm like, okay, you're going to hear it within X amount of seconds, you're going to see it within an X amount of seconds, but it seems synced?
Yeah.
How is that happening? What the fuck?
Well, do you know Donald Hoffman?
No.
Oh my god, he's one of my favorites. He's great TED Talks and you watch, but his theory is pretty much that what we perceive visually is nothing like the reality that is underneath it. So his whole thing is, and he's made a mathematical equation that proves this, pretty much that over time, with natural selection, we have been farther and farther removed from objective reality. So what he did is he ran a simulation where on one side the simulated being perceives objective reality, whereas the other one only perceives fitness payoffs. So it sees things that will help it survive. So it sees the food, it sees, you get the gist. And
so, like, one person, if I understand you right, one person could look at, say, like, a plate of cooked chicken, and then you're saying, like, the guy that sees objective reality sees, oh, that's the breast that was underneath all these feathers sitting on the chicken, and it was alive at one point. And then the other one's seeing, that's X amount of calories, X amount of things, and that's going to provide me, like, Y amount of sustenance.
Bring it back even further, like animals surviving in nature. Like, one has a visual system that puts fruits in, like, brighter colors so they're easier to see, whereas the other one sees just all of the information that can be perceived by its visual system. The one that sees less but sees the things that will help it survive, or
the bright colored berries,
exactly, has a better chance of surviving. And so when you run that simulation over time, eventually the thing that sees objective reality dies off, and the thing that sees just fitness payoffs survives. And eventually, over time, that means that we get to the point where we are
narrower field of vision,
where we don't see anything that's real. And so how he describes it is, it's like the desktop of your computer. What we see is like the icons on the desktop. We don't see the ones and zeros and all of that information laid underneath of it, because it would just be too complex for us to handle.
Yeah.
What we see is a simplified version of it that can help us survive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when we were kids, and TVs were only like red, green, and blue pixels. Like, you don't see the red, green, and blue pixels. You see the image they're portraying.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck, that's crazy. No, but
sorry for the tangent.
No, dude, it's actually
true stuff.
But it's actually like as above, so below, because it translates into what I was saying, right? Like, it's like we're being further and further removed from reality. Like, think about our most common communication for the lay person, like the average person, is most likely going to be text messages, right? But it's like, you're not seeing what's actually there. I'm not hearing you say what you're thinking. I'm just seeing the text of you trying to explain what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Like, but like in everything, like not just communication, but like the same example I used earlier. Like, we eat food every day because we just go to the grocery store, we buy it, and then we cook it. If that, some people are just fucking ordering like 90% of their food from Skip the Dishes or whatever. But then we look at the food and we're like, oh, that's a snack, and we're just gonna eat it, and that's just because I'm hungry. But like before, like say like 1,000 years ago, which isn't that far back in history, like relatively speaking, like you'd have to fucking see the animal and be like, okay, that might be able to provide sustenance, or see a vegetable or a fruit. Like, you're not, like, now we only see finished product, and we don't even understand where it comes from fully.
Yeah.
Like, I've never hunted, I've never killed an animal to eat it or anything like that. You know, like, we're so far removed from the reality of actual things that we're experiencing.
Yeah, and it goes into the whole idea where it's like, for progressive rate of development, there needs to be more specificity in people's jobs. So, you know, you look at, if you want to get more productive, or anybody, we outsource jobs. We outsource things that we need to do. I don't know where I was going with this point. Can we time out and I run the washroom?
Yeah. Cool. For no sweat, dude. We'll be right back, people.
And to the commercial. It's brought to you in part. Oh, I don't want to.
By Pfizer. All right, we're back. We took our pee break, man. Hey, dude, it's so much better to talk when you don't have to pee, because you're always like, you can't fucking focus. At least I can't fucking focus. I'm like, fuck, I have to pee. But I was actually I had to wait you out, man, because I peed 2 times before and you didn't. So I was like, if I go pee a 3rd time and he doesn't go, I was like, fuck, I gotta wait him out. So I was waiting for you to do it, but
you're welcome. I read your mind, buddy. Don't worry.
I'm glad you did, man. Thank you. So I should have said, I guess, like, as we jump back into this, I should have actually asked you in the very beginning, like, do you have anything that you wanted to chat about with me? Do you have anything that you want to discuss? Because I don't really structure these things. I know you've got so much fucking cool knowledge. We can jump right back into the conversation we were just having, even though I forget where we were. But, like, did you have anything that you kind of wanted to chat about?
What did I want to chat about? Nothing in particular. What was some good topics we brushed? Dreams.
Dreams. We'll revisit dreams, man.
Let's pick up there. Where you open?
Okay. I guess so. I don't really have much knowledge about dreams, to be honest. I haven't had dreams from what I can remember for quite a while. I remember having them as a kid, but I know from what I know. I shouldn't say I know this to be true. From what I know, obviously, like, smoking weed before bed can fuck with either having dreams or remembering your dreams, either one of those, but essentially it's the same thing in my perception, because I don't see the dream or remember seeing it. So, like, I have always been a pretty big pothead, and so, like, I don't really have, like, an idea of, like, what my dreams are or anything like that. The best I can relate to that is, like, even say, like, a mushroom trip. Like, I get a lot of value out of that, so I understand. Because obviously when you're dreaming, it's a DMT release in your brain, right? Yeah. Sort of. Yeah. And so essentially, like, I understand that kind of a trip or a dream are sort of similar. And I've gotten, and I don't condone doing drugs, but my experience is I've gotten value out of some of the mushroom trips I've done in the past that have actually stuck with me in terms of like behaviors I do to this day. So like I see the value in dreams, and that's why I've recently been thinking about this. That's how I'll preface the conversation. And right now I'm listening to the audiobook Limitless by Jim Quick, and he talks about the value of dreams and how all these great people in history have kind of come up with new perspectives or ideas or inventions, etc., through dreams that they had. It was like, holy fuck, I had this dream, and it not that like kind of they were able to, I guess, have the future be told to them through dreams, or that these dreams were showing them images, and then if you see this thing, then maybe this or anything like that. Like, I think it's more literal than that. Like, they get cool ideas, or different things can give them, I guess, perspectives that help them. So I'm trying to see, I see the value in dreams, and I'm trying to view it in a way where it's like, okay, how can I start to tap into this resource? That's the way I'm thinking about it now. And so for me, because I sometimes can remember certain things from dreams now, I've been trying to think about it more. The tactics I've been using are like, before I go to bed, I say to myself, like, I'm going to remember my dream tonight. Yeah. And then I leave a little notebook beside my bed so that when I wake up, I can write down anything I remember right away. But that's kind of like the only two things someone recommended I take magnesium before I sleep. And there was one other vitamin I don't remember, but I am taking magnesium now. And so those are my tactics to try and remember more from my dreams, and I guess use them better, because that's a resource I want to tap into. Yeah. Whenever I find out about like, hey, there's value in this, I'm like, how much value we talk? How much effort is this going to take? Because if I can, find a way to be more productive in my life, or love people better, or communicate better, or make more money, or if I can get a benefit, depending on the effort level or the risk, I'm in. So I'm trying to get into this more. Like, what's your background here? How can you help me out, man?
So where to dive in on this one? I came upon this in a very similar way to you, where it's kind of like, okay, like, there's this big portion of my life.
I'm going to turn this real quick because you're comfortable. I like that.
There we go. There's this big portion of our life, which, I don't know, I can't remember the number. I'm going to make up a number. Okay. A third of our life is spent to sleep.
Sure.
And
24, right?
Yeah.
If people are sleeping 8 hours a day.
Yeah. Most people know.
Yeah, I was. You should. For a long time.
If there's this big portion of our life that is, I don't want to say wasted, but we're not really doing anything consciously. Yeah. Like, how can you make that as productive as possible? So first I went down the route of like, okay, like, let me track my sleep quality, REM sleep, deep sleep, all these things, and that's why I have an Aura ring. But other topic.
There's a nice little plug. They're not paying us.
I get no kickback from this whatsoever. Yeah. But so I got first into how do I optimize my sleep. So quality sleep, depth of sleep, all this stuff. And then I started to get into the more metaphysical aspects where it's like, okay, like, can I lucid dream? Can I like actually remember and do things in my dreams?
I could when I was a kid.
Yeah?
I could. Legit, dude. I remember. I could fly in a couple of dreams, dude.
Those are the best kind of dreams.
When I could just like, Dragon Ball Z, I was like, I wish I could fly like Goku. I could in my dreams. Now, I was explaining to someone today, literally today, I was like, I'm fucking clumsy in my dreams. Like, I was like, the first word I used was slippery. Like, I'm like slippery, dude. Like, like say you have a dream where someone's chasing you and you're running. And I feel like everyone has some sort of a version of this. But like, I feel slippery when I run. Like, if I turn a corner, my legs keep going the same way, but my upper body doesn't. Like, I'll slip out. Like, I'm a slippery person. Like, or like, if I were to hit someone, like, I know, and like, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm not a fucking trained fighter or anything. But I'm a decently big guy, right? And I know that if I were to hit someone as hard as I could, I would inflict some sort of physical damage on most people. Some sort. Not like maximum amount, but more than I could in my dreams, right? So I feel like when I was younger, I could lucid dream more. Now I feel like a limp noodle, dude. Like, in my dreams. Like, I'm kind of useless.
Yeah.
I was like Peter Parker before, and now I'm like the kid that went to his school that you never see in the movie. Like,
what I was gonna say was
sorry to interrupt.
No. You're good, brother. You're good. I love the one-offs. Once I got past and I really figured out how to physically optimize my sleep, I got into the more metaphysical stuff. So I went down a deep rabbit hole into, you know what Western magic is? With a K, not with a C. Magic.
No, I'll say no.
Okay, so it's sort of like an occult sort of
like pagan. Because I've done a lot of research on like Norse mythology and kind of like that kind of stuff recently, so I might be able to understand this.
Similar. A lot of the Western Hermetics and all that stuff come more out of the Judeo-Christian belief system, but pretty much what it is it's the esoteric side of Western religion. And so what emerged from that was this group called the Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn was a group of cultists, and they took practices from all sorts of religions, spiritual practices from all sorts of religions, and they created a system, and part of that system was to develop and explore lucid dreams. So when I heard about this, I was like, okay, I'm going to research all this. And so they've created a methodology of exploring and helping enhancing meditative states and lucid dreaming. And part of that is like what you're doing is keeping a dream journal. So every time you wake up, the second you wake up, you go to that journal and you write down as many things as you can remember as possible. Mm-hmm. And even if you haven't remembered anything, you just simply write down, didn't remember anything, and you get into that habit. And eventually you'll get more and more vivid dreams if you stay committed to it. And eventually, if you follow along with the practice, what you develop is the ability to lucid dream more often, at least have better recall of your dreams.
Like it's like a muscle memory almost.
Exactly. Because most people, they don't even think about that. But, once you put that conscious intent behind remembering, then you begin to access it more and more. And like you were saying earlier, that there was like quite a bit of value in, remembering your dreams. I completely agree with that, where, you look at someone like Albert Einstein, what he would do is, I think it was like he would hold a cup in his hand or something in his hand, and he'd take a nap in his chair. And so as soon as he lost consciousness and that grip let go, he would wake up. And this is apparently how he came up with, this might just be completely bullshit, but I read this somewhere. This is how he came up with a lot of...
I heard the theory of relativity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so... even in my own personal experiences, it's very interesting. You record your dreams, and eventually when you go back and reread them, you begin to see how your time, like what was going on in your life, begins to reflect in your dreams, and it can actually give you some guidance upon what to do and what's happening, what you might be feeling unconsciously or subconsciously, however you want to slice that. And yeah, it's a valuable practice, I find. Long-winded answer, I know.
Yeah, no, I like it though, because I guess I'll start by asking you this. This is what I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah.
This is my real word, my real talk. But so I'm pretty decent at forming like kind of morning routines, right? Like I'm pretty good at it. I've bounced around a little bit in terms of what it is, but currently my routine is when I wake up, I do cardio in the morning, like just literally. I'm not like a fucking intense CrossFitter or doing anything nuts. Like I go for like a brisk jog.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like the reason I do it is because it wakes me up a little bit, gets my blood flowing. I just kind of feel more energized and less hungry right off the bat. So like I kind of do it for that. Right. So anyways, my morning routine is I go for a little jog around my neighborhood here. I stretch for like 5-10 minutes, nothing too big. Again, just to get blood flow. I shower. I journal, and then that's that. But because like journaling's at the tail end of my routine right now, like when I wake up, I'm still thinking, even though I have my pad and pen right beside my bed, the second I wake up, I'm like almost immediately lacing up my shoes.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh fuck, I forgot to write down my dream.
Yeah.
And I've done that 3 days in a row now. So, like, how do I implement, like, the first thing I do in the morning? Like, what did you do to start doing a dream journal? Because I always think about journaling, like, after I've kind of woken up. I need to actually wake my brain up before I dream, before I journal, I feel like. So, like, how did you get to just, like, journaling right away? Because for me, I'm just, like, I'm go. I get out of bed and I'm out of my room. I'm like, fuck, I forgot to write it down.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get into doing it first thing?
So this is like, it would apply to any single habit, but I think like for me, I'm very analytic. Like I need to break things down and
like cue
really
habit reward kind of thing.
Yes, but more like whenever I'm interested in something or like a skill or something, I break it down and I need to understand every little component of it. So I do this with everything. It's just something I do. And for me, I find that the most fundamental component of any single habit is simply awareness.
Okay.
With that being said, then what would be the number one action to help implement any sort of habit is to gain a greater awareness. So for me, the number one thing that's the foundation is meditation.
Okay.
So practicing just deepening your clarity and your concentration and having that be more sustained throughout your day is a game changer. And if you practice it to the degree where you've cultivated a certain degree of this awareness, the second you wake up, if you're clicking into, okay, I'm awake, then, writing in your journal or whatever it is that you want to do is much easier because, you're taking conscious action of what you want to do.
Yeah.
But it's hard that transition in and out of sleep is the hardest.
Dude, that's the foggiest thing ever. I was about to ask you that because in Limitless, one of the tips that he gives you for remembering your dreams is to keep your eyes closed when you first wake up. Mm-hmm. Because once you start seeing things and your senses start kind of awakening, like your physical senses start kind of awakening, it starts to like immediately flood your brain with stuff, so you're gonna be more likely to forget your dream. But then I was literally thinking this morning when I woke up, I was like, when did I wake up? Were my eyes open? Or like, were my eyes closed? Have you ever woken up and you're like still eyes closed? Like, what the fuck? Like, what? It's such a weird foggy time, I feel like. Like, I couldn't pinpoint when I wake up. Was it when I looked at my phone to see the time? Or the clock? Or like, is it the sound, the first second of my alarm?
Yeah.
Or like, when is waking up? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Or am I just tripping over?
No. And this is exactly something I practiced for a long time, where it's like, I would...
What constitutes waking up? What constitutes that, dude? You have brain activity while you sleep. You know what I mean?
Well, and that goes back to like when I was differentiating between awareness and consciousness.
Okay.
Because, the moment you become conscious is when you would be considered awake. So, I can't really draw a line of where that is, but there is...
Do you get what I'm saying, though?
Yeah. But, I find like when I used to practice, like staying aware as I can, this like going into sleep and seeing how fast I can become aware as soon as I wake up, you start to see that boundary is so loose. Mm-hmm. And even in your day, like, how often do you get caught in daydream or caught in thoughts where, you're not aware that you're thinking, but there's this whole storyline going on inside of your head that's driving your entire experience, driving your emotions, driving your actions, and you're not even aware to it. Yeah.
Or like, fuck, there's people that are just like kind of walking down the street and you're like, is this person even fucking awake? Like, yeah, it's so hard to tell like when consciousness and unconsciousness is, because like I am somebody that like even you, I don't know if you are like kind of more aware of this in conversation, but like I have to look away a lot of the times when I'm speaking to somebody to actually like think about what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And so like I get caught all the time, whether I'm in a deep conversation or if I'm just chilling with somebody, like I'm just staring into the fucking wall. And I'm thinking about, like, I'm still like with that person, I'm still thinking about them, and I might even probably still be listening to them. But like I'm like just like off. Like, I'm just kind of, like, absorbing for a bit. And so, like, I get what you're saying about, like, yeah, because am I conscious then? Because I'm not conscious of, like, oh, maybe I'm mouth breathing at the time, or, like, you know, I'm not conscious of what I'm doing specifically, but I'm still awake. I'm still listening. My senses are still working. Like, yeah, it's, like, so weird to think about, like, what constitutes conscious or unconscious. Because sometimes, you know, like, there's those times where you, like, kind of wake up before your alarm. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, I know my alarm didn't wake me up, but, like, my eyes are open now. How long have I been awake?
Yeah.
You know, was it like when I left REM sleep, or was it like where's the line? But I like what you're talking about in terms of, like, when you go to bed, because I have sometimes this weird experience where there's this I do just meditate, sometimes just listening to music. I do it sometimes just silent. Yeah. But sometimes there's this specific YouTube video that I listen to. It's a guided meditation, and it was literally my introduction into meditation years ago, and I still listen to it now sometimes when I just kind of feel too overwhelmed. Like, it's kind of just like it walks me through it. And the dude's voice is super calming, and there's some good music to it. Yeah. It's kind of like just like an autopilot meditation. I can just throw my headphones over my ears and start meditating, and it helps put me to sleep, man. It's really sick. But there's this weird part during the meditation every single fucking time where I'm listening to it. I have headphones on in my bed, and I'm just laying there in the dark, feeling my body, experiencing my breath, experiencing that second, that moment, the phenomenon, whatever I'm going through, the warmth, the cold, etc. And there's this weird time where I can feel myself dozing off, and I have the conscious thought, I think it's time to put the video off and take the headphones off. I'm basically asleep at this point. Yeah. And I can still consciously do that and take it off. And then there's other times where I wake up and say, like, there's, like, still an on phone screen that's playing random YouTube videos that just kept going. Yeah. So it's like sometimes I am aware of it, and I am able to just differentiate, like, you're about to fall asleep. And then within seconds, I'm asleep. But I'll still physically, you know, lock my phone, plug it in, take the headphones off, turn off the fucking headphones, put them down, and then I'm asleep in seconds. It's like, sometimes I'm so aware of when I am falling asleep, and then other times I'm like, but I know I went to bed at 9, but when did I sleep? Yeah. It's so weird, man. I guess, like, having one of those rings or having something that, I guess, like, monitors you would help with that. But, like, I'm just kind of, I'm raw dogging it, dude. I'm trying to figure this shit out. What do you suggest, man? Do I need a ring?
For what? For
knowing this shit? Like, what?
You never know.
Or do I just need to meditate more? Do you think that might be the answer?
I tell everybody this, and
the blanket statement is you need to meditate more. Whatever you're doing now, more.
It's not necessarily more. It's a type. I like meditation is such a loose concept. Yeah, and you know, I always say it's like the development of concentration is the most effective tool if you're looking at it from that standpoint. So
different tools for different jobs then.
Exactly. And you know, like, everybody has different forms of meditation. Everybody's like, oh yeah, I meditate. Like, maybe you listen to something, maybe you're doing like Headspace, maybe you're whatever app or whatever, but I find the most effective one, especially for our society, which moves so quickly, is to sit down and just practice concentrating on one thing. It's like for quite a few months, what I would do is I had a little like sticker that you get from, like, you know, the staple from Staples, where it's like your marking binders or whatever. Just a little dot, and I put it on my wall, and for half an hour every day in the morning, I would sit down and I would just look at that dot, and every time that my mind would wander, I would just bring it back. And once I established that practice, I began to realize how constantly lost in thought I was, and how powerful it is to be aware of what's going on in your mind, what thoughts you're having, what you're feeling. Because the moment that you can bring awareness to a thought or a feeling, you no longer become identified with it. You're then able to take a actionary approach to it rather than reactionary.
Yeah. When you're saying like you're concentrating on the dot, are you saying like you're thinking about the color that it is or the size of it, or you're just looking at it and you have nothing in your brain? Like what's going on in your brain?
So the practice is simply to look at it and to just place your awareness upon it. So you don't need, let whatever thoughts, you can't control your thoughts. Your thoughts are always going to be spontaneously arising, but to just focus on looking at it and the perception, your visual perception, and just focus on that thought with full attention. And, when you start thinking, when you start itching, when you start getting uncomfortable, pulling back to that thought, and just that act of, noticing your attention wandering, bring it back. Noticing it's wandering and bringing it back.
Yeah. See, maybe that's something I need to practice more like visually, because I've always felt like I have that sort of experience with sounds. So like I'll give two examples. The first one was when I first started meditating, was way back when I was living with my parents, and there was construction going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And at first I was extremely frustrated, but then I realized it's actually easier for me to meditate with a little bit of rhythmic background noise than in silence, because what was happening was there was pounding of a pile driver, but it was the same tempo all day. So I'm sitting there listening to it, and I'm sitting down basically in my chair and I'm meditating, and that sound was kind of my constant. Like, so for you, focusing on the dot was me just listening to this pound. It was just like bang, 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 and I couldn't escape it. There was nothing, like I close my window, I still hear it. And it kept me consistent. Like it was kind of my thing I was focusing on. And I feel the same way about, certain physical things as well. Like say in the gym, like I'm able to focus better and be more present with my movements, with my workouts, with maybe a risk of injury. If I'm like, oh, this feels a little tight right now. Like I feel like I'm more focused if I have music in my ears. Whereas like if I don't have music, then my mind kind of wanders around. I'm not really in it. I'm kind of maybe like talking to people or watching the TV or whatever it is. Like I feel like maybe I'm more naturally inclined like in terms of like audio than I am like with visual. And maybe I need to focus more on the visual to improve that.
I just might be, I think the correct term is sadistic, but anything that I really suck at, I fucking love to do.
Yeah.
So like for me, like growing up, like my attention was always scattered. So the second that I was like, okay, let's just look at this dot, and I would be distracted, I'd be uncomfortable. Like it was just so difficult. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to practice. Like, I could sit down and meditate with like a guided audio, whatever, and I'd find it like pretty easy. But as soon as I went to this, where it's like there's no nice sounds, like there's nothing, it's just like bare,
you're raw dogging it.
You're raw dogging it.
Yeah.
And it was just so uncomfortable at first, because it's like, how often do people really get quiet? Like no distractions, no music, no nothing. Sit there and just be fully present with everything.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny you say that, man, because actually now that I think about it, because I'm talking about like music or sounds, like I rarely, like dude, when you came in today, like I never have silence around me. I'm either making noise or I'm listening to music.
Yeah.
And like when I'm meal prepping, I'm listening to music. When I go to the grocery store, even half the time, I have a headphone in because I'm listening to music or an audiobook or a podcast. But I just feel like, I feel like you're right, dude. I never really have silence unless I'm actually intentionally creating silence.
Yeah.
There's never silence in my life. Do you ever drive in silence?
Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
It's my...
it's my pissed off vibe. The only time I drive in silence, I'm like either heartbroken or fucking livid.
Yeah, see, I don't get that. So it's like, for me, it's like when my OCD kicks in and I have an idea in my head where I'm deconstructing something, or I'm like, trying to understand something and I'm like thinking through different ideas. It's rarely ever am I quiet when I'm driving. Always something going on.
Yeah. Do you turn the music off when you're thinking like that?
If it's something like I need to really concentrate on, then I need to. Like I get overstimulated really quick. Yeah.
The thing is, when I'm driving and I'm thinking about something that I'm trying to figure out, I do turn the music off, but I speak to myself. I record myself talk. Like I have fucking endless videos in my phone of like, hey, record a podcast episode with this person. Yeah. Or like, I want to make an episode about this, but I still need to figure out this, and this. Like, this is kind of troubling me about it, or a reminder to look this up later, or like it's always like kind of, I'm listening to something about that, or I'm just kind of talking about it with myself. It's basically a schizophrenic with a phone. Like, that's basically where I'm
at. As long as there's one mark, you're okay.
Yeah, like as long as I'm recording it just for the purpose of listening to it later, then I'm not as crazy as it sounds. Yeah. But like that's the way I look at it because, well, I use it as a tool because then I can listen to it later and kind of, have a different state of mind or a different like kind of perspective when I listen to it. But at the end of the day, when I'm trying to figure something out, like some people write down their shit and that's how they figure out their ideas. But like I feel like I learn and figure things out through conversation, like just like this right now. So like when I'm by myself, I'll literally like I'll say out loud, I'll ask myself the questions that I'm wondering, and then it's kind of weird. Like I'll literally be by myself and I'll be like, is this person gonna do this? I'll literally say it. Yeah. Do you do that or do you write it down? Am I fucked?
No. You're not fucked. I can promise you that. Personally, I'm more of a thinker. Like, the majority of the time, like, I'm pretty quiet and reserved when people first meet me. And then over time, I open up. But yeah, I'm big into just thinking things out in my head. And then I'm a very visual learner as well. So it's like either writing words or just drawing pictures or graphs or whatever it is for me to really be able to work with whatever I'm thinking about. But I'm not much of a talker when it comes to that. But to each his own, man.
No, that makes sense because I am an auditory listener. Like, so like I'm not someone that has to take notes or do things. I have to have a conversation or remember things. If I say things out loud and hear them repeatedly, I'll remember them. I'm not somebody that like write it down 7 times and you're going to memorize it. For me, I'll literally, and I feel like this is like some weird, I don't know if it's like I wouldn't even say it's like a handicap to learn, but like if you were to task me with writing something down 7 times, my brain starts to produce just like, how do I do this movement? Like when I was in elementary school and they're like, okay, you have to write lines when you fuck up or do something wrong. Like, I will not swear in class. I was the kid that would write I, will, yeah. not. Like, that's just the way my brain thinks. Like, I'm like, how can I make this quick? Yeah. I don't like this, right? But if I speak with you and we're talking about dreams, then I remember, okay, I have to do this, and this because I said it, he said it, and then I repeated it and confirmed it. Like, there was enough times that my brain heard the message that I remembered it. So I feel like maybe... I think this comes back to like what I was saying before about people that when they're like, oh, this is how my family is, so this is how I am. Yeah. And I'm saying right now, oh, I'm an auditory listener, so this is how I am. But I feel like there's a part of me that is able to and wants to tap into the other side, which is what you're saying, man. Like where you're like a visual guy, whereas I'm like an audio guy. Like,
well, I think like when I hear you, what I'm thinking is like it's the difference between memorizing facts versus having an understanding. Like for me,
conceptual understanding.
Exactly. Like if I am trying to like for me like when I was just studying anatomy, it was fucking hard because you're just looking at something and you're putting a word to it. But when you can have an understanding of like maybe what is the Latin breakdown of this word, or you have a way to frame what you're trying to remember or understand within a bigger context, then it sticks easier. So like, you know, you're trying to figure out why is brewing coffee this way better? Well, you know, you look into, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm lost, buddy.
No. I think I follow you. Like it's It's kind of like if I told you, like, your digestive system is what breaks down food to give you nutrients. That's like the word and then the definition. But then if you understand like the system and the reasons behind the system, you understand the concepts of like, say, like the difference between mechanical digestion and chemical digestion, or you understand the difference and you understand the function of each thing. Well, it's like, well, why are we breaking these nutrients down? Well, what do these nutrients serve as a purpose? Once you understand all the concepts, then you could better remember it, utilize each tool properly, because you understand, like, well, if I'm feeling a certain way, maybe I can introduce this vitamin into my life, because you understand the system of how it all plays out. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're like?
Yeah, just like understanding it within a context and within a framework, and then it's easier to remember when you understand it within that framework rather than just trying to work something out in its own. Like what you're saying, like, try to memorize one word or write one word out all at once. It's, understand it in its greater context.
Yeah, because and then the next step, I think, because I always say this to some people as well, is like it's easy to understand things conceptually, but then it's another to be able to physically implement it.
Yes, big time. I completely agree with that, and that's a big issue I used to have when it came to reading books, where it's like, you can read as many books as you want, but if you're not doing the work to then really integrate what you've just learned, then what's it worth?
Yeah, it's like Andy Frisella says, it's like a success zombie. Like someone that chases like the, what do I need to know? What do I need to know? What do I need to know? But then all they're doing is learning about what they need to know. It's like, dude, have you tried doing any of those things? Like, you could read about weight loss for X amount of years, but if you don't do the things, you won't get the result.
Yeah, 100%.
Or same goes with money or anything like that, right? Like, it's kind of like, yeah, I struggle with that too. Like, and it even goes back to the concept of, I understand that journaling about my dreams in the morning will help me dream lucidly better. But then it's actually implementing the fucking habit. Yeah. Like, I conceptually understand it, but then I haven't physically done the deed. Yeah, that's weird, man. You were saying earlier you're a thinker, man. You're not like a talker by yourself. When you're by yourself and you're like a little bit pissed off or confused, do you say what the fuck or do you think what the fuck?
Depends. If I'm by myself, I'm thinking it.
You're thinking it?
Yeah.
Because, dude, I caught myself saying it this morning. I was by myself and I was in my kitchen. I thought of something and I went, what the fuck? And I went, I wonder if it's normal to say that out loud. Yeah. I didn't say the second part, but I did say the former. I did say the what the fuck out loud. And then I thought, I wonder if that's normal. Like, do other people do that? You're just a thinker, hey?
I'm a big thinker.
What about in conversation when you think it? Like, if I say something right now and you're thinking, what the fuck? Do you say it out loud or do you just think it? You don't gotta be polite.
This whole conversation, I've just been thinking, what the fuck are we talking about?
Yeah, you're like, what the fuck?
No, I don't know. It's a very weird thing to examine because I feel like when I'm talking, like, I'm never thinking about what I'm gonna say. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just like in the spur of the moment. Mm-hmm. Words are just fucking coming out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, sure, in this conversation, a few times where I'm like, how the fuck did we get onto this topic? Yeah. But besides that, like, no, not really, man.
Those are my favorite conversations, though, man. Like
the ones that make you feel high even when you're not high.
Yeah. No, but also just the conversations that are able to free run. Like, because I feel like I learn more from that. Yeah. Because, like, I feel like I'm not able to communicate properly if I'm not able to just go off on tangents. Because tangents are kind of how we get people to relate to the other thing that they can't relate to yet. Mm. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like I'm throwing you a bone because I know you get this, and then if you get this, you might see where I'm going with this. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I just call them conversational breadcrumbs. You know, it's like you're just having a conversation and you're just like leaving little bits out. It's like, okay, you can travel down this road if you want.
Yeah. I find it so difficult sometimes. Like, there was a guy I was going to have on my podcast, and he was like, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever the fuck you want, man. I don't know. Like, and he's like, well, can you come up with like an agenda?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, dude, I don't have like a structured thing that because if you tell me talk about this topic, I'll say everything I know within a minute. And then that's it. It's not like a conversation. It's just me talking to you. You know what I mean?
I was almost...
We're talking at you.
Man, I was almost that guy. I was like thinking like, should we like make a few pinpoints of like topics we want to touch on?
Even that's fine.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked you. I'm like, do you have anything you want to chat about? Because if I don't address it, then it's probably in the back of your mind and then you're not present during the conversation. So I'd rather just be like, let's talk about what you want to talk about. But like, yeah, like I said, if you give me like a strict thing to talk about, I'll just say everything I know about it and then I'll listen to you say it. And then it's like, we're not really like conversing. Yeah. It's just you talking at me and then I'm talking at you. And then it's like this weird inorganic thing and we're trying to convince people that it's organic and it doesn't play out for... I'm not good at faking it. I'm not like a good actor, to be honest. Yeah. So, like, anyways, at the end of the day, he didn't want to be on the show unless I had a value proposition for the audience, basically. He's like, we got to give him something. And I'm like, dude, I don't always have something to give, but I want to talk to you. Yeah. Right? And then even another example of that is like a couple weeks back, I was on my buddy's podcast and we had a topic that we were going to talk about, right? And I took fucking notes preparing for it. It was something that I'm like pretty knowledgeable about. It was something about like kind of what my podcast is about. That's why we were going to do the podcast together. And so I have like a fucking 2-page thing in my journal. I'm ready to rock and roll. We're going to talk about this topic and that's the main theme. And within the first 5 minutes, I completely take us off track. And literally the entire podcast was about other things. Like the first 5 minutes, we were talking about that topic. And then the rest of the hour, we're on about other shit. And I even apologized to him. I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry we went off track. And he's like, dude, I actually loved that conversation. Yeah. So, like, maybe he was lying to me, but I'm assuming he's not. But, like, I feel like that's just the way my brain works. I can't really just have like one thing to just focus on and talk about because it brings up other ideas and then I'm trying to figure those out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you can only stay on one topic for so long too, where, you know, like what you're saying, when you're trying to be authentic, it's, you're kind of just spinning off the top of your head and riffing back and forth. If you try and put too much structure around that, it becomes like this robotic thing rather than like a dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so weird, man. I don't know, man. I think that's a pretty good way to fucking end it, man. I think that's a pretty good way to fucking wrap it up. Unless you have anything else you want to chat about.
Let's pause it there till episode 2, right?
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for bearing with us, folks. I don't know if you've watched a full episode of my podcast. I don't take offense if you haven't, but I do my own intros. I don't do my own outros, man. That's on you. So the direction is this. You got to get people that stuck with us this long. You got to give them some sort of a message that uplifts their spirits, or maybe your main takeaway from this conversation, or something that'll motivate them or make them happy. And then tell them where they can find you. Give yourself a little plug, and we'll give a little farewell.
Damn, I should have watched an episode.
No sweat, dude. I trap everyone this way. Dude, I trap everyone.
You called me out there, okay.
Positive message or a takeaway, and then just tell people where they can find you. They know what you're about now.
Positive, do they? I feel like we fucking crossed every road on that one.
I feel like everyone knows us right now. Like, I feel like we're best buddies.
They know. I feel that too,
dude. They know a little bit about our history. They know about our perception of things. They know about what we think about, what we dream about. Actually, we didn't talk about that, but
I mean,
we can talk about what we dream about next time.
Oh man, we got lots of things we can talk about. I mean, at the very end, I guess, just be authentic. At the end of the day, if you learn to become curious, you will gain a skill that will provide for you for the rest of your life. And the thing is curiosity isn't something you can fake. It's something you need to find within yourself, and it's something that you need to be consistent at. Otherwise, it's too easy to fall into the trap of, you know, coming home watching Netflix and, you know, losing your mind to to other people's will. So on that note, you can follow me at Mitch Stro on Instagram. I'm not really on there too much. When I have my own podcast, I'll plug that next time.
Fucking right.
Other than that, it was a lovely conversation, my man.
Fuck yeah, dude. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for anyone listening to this or watching this. We're signing out now. Have a good night, or I guess a good morning or afternoon, whenever the fuck you guys listen to this. It's kind of getting towards the evening for us here. But thank you so much. Much love and peace out.